Hey everybody, this is Garrett with Earth and Time, and today I'm taking you to one of my favorite places in the Houston, Texas area, Old Town Spring. And this video will mark my 100th video for this channel. So I'm so excited that I'm taking you to one of my favorite places in the Houston area to learn more about this old Western town and old railroad town, as well as it be my 100th video. So exciting. All right, everybody, with that being said, let's get to it. Old Town Spring was set up in the late 1800s. In fact, the date I saw was 1873, and this started out as a little community built around farming in the area, brought in a lot of German individuals to this area of the country. In fact, there's a lot of German heritage both here as well as in the central portion of Texas. Old Town Spring really grew and became a well-known spot because it ended up becoming the roundhouse and one of the major thoroughfares for the railroad in this region. Eventually it would move on and away, and the town slowly dwindled. However, there's been a resurgence of this town, which you can see behind me, with a bunch of boutique shops, with a bunch of restaurants, and so it's become a really popular tourist destination as well. But why I'm here is to really talk about the history, although I will show you some of my favorite restaurants and some of my favorite shops while we're working our way through Old Town Spring. And whenever possible, my first stop is always at the local museum. So we're going to start by going to the Spring Historical Museum. Entering in the museum, it's inside this old building. I don't know if this is an old community center or what this building was, but it looks like they have a lot of different displays, and they have a picture of what Old Town Spring would have looked like kind of in 1910. And what I'll point out here is the train station, which is actually a restaurant called Puffabilly's in that area. You can see the Wunji Saloon, which we'll talk about the Wunji family a little bit later on. They really helped establish this place, and we can actually still go there and see that saloon. And we can go see this building, although I believe it's been moved over on this side now. But we can walk around these streets and take a look at this old Western town. So it turns out the building I'm actually in right now is the old courthouse building, and that's where they have this museum. So that's really cool. So this was originally built in 1948 as a church, but then when the church relocated, they used the building as a courthouse here. And this is the courthouse or judge's box up here. So that means if I was to turn around here, so you see where the judge would be, that means that this would have been the courtroom back in the day here, basically in the 1950s and 60s. So I'll start right away with some of the significant dates here, just so you get a timeline in that. So although some of the first settlers were here, really what I read is in 1836 there were actually some settlers here. The majority of folks started coming in 1840, and eventually by 1873 you had the town of Spring. And with that, there was also the creation of a lot of railroad industry here, including a roundhouse, which became a center of commerce and of jobs for this area. So the museum has a lot of railroad memorabilia because the railroad was central to life here, and really what spurred on the population into kind of the early 1900s when the main line and the roundhouse moved from this area down into Houston. But they have things like that's a cute little bear and railroad nails and information about the Santa Fe Railroad coming in here. And here's a nice picture of the Spring Roundhouse circa 1902. So what they do is they bring the engines in here, they're able to turn them around and take them on different lines. And apparently there were a couple lines that were in this area. Here is a schematic of what that rail yard looked like. So you can bring in trains in here, you can turn them around, you can set them on these would each be tracks, and they could park the trains there for maintenance and then move other trains out, and so they can go and truck down to towards Galveston and towards Houston, and then up towards Fort Worth or Palestine, were the two main railways that were here. And we're going to walk right down this portion of the street in a little while, but here's Wunji Saloon on the right hand side, and here's the railway depot, or the train depot, which we can also see here. Now this got moved, and this actually moved, it's not at the end of the street anymore that we can see here, but became a restaurant called Puffabilly's, and we'll walk by and I'll show you where that's at. But the Wunji's and Wunji Brothers Restaurant and Saloon is still here even after all this time. And you can see this was from 1921. So what were the trains carrying here and why were they so important? Well, they were carrying a lot of lumber. So the other thing that was in this area driving the economy is that they had a mill here and a sawmill, and so they were able to use that lumber and ship it around Texas and potentially even beyond. And that brought in a lot of work into this area. So in this museum, there's a lot of things on everything from talking about music and daily living to church to medical in the area to different individuals, as well as learning about, I'm going to pan over here to schools. So here's stuff from Spring High School, and there actually was a Wunji's High School here as well, and you can see some of the memorabilia. At its height of population here was about 1,200, and that was when the railway was at its peak. Now today Houston spread into this area, so the population's well over 1,200 for the greater Spring area, but when it was its own isolated or independent community, the highest population it got was about 1,200. And here's something that's interesting. So here's another, you'll recognize this name again, Wunji, very prominent name again here. And they had community telephone booths for a long time here, all the way into the 1930s and 1940s. Then we had a couple phones in the community if they needed to reach others outside of the community. So they had these community phone booths, which would be at like a service station, or one was at Wunji's garage, and then they had another one at what was known as Klein's store, and individuals can go in. So this is a very old phone booth. Check that out, really cool. And based on this exhibit, it looks like they farmed hay, and of course they had cattle here as well, and looks like they had corn that they were planting and making into products as well, including some those old corn whiskey jugs. So the product and the most famous farm product coming out of Spring actually was something known as homebrew or joy juice or Mountain Dew. And so when there's prohibition going on, they were actually making corn whiskey. So sure enough, I wasn't wrong on that became the major export from this area. And here's some old pictures of some of the 1930s whiskey distilleries in this area. Since we went through the museum, we got a little bit of history and background now. Let's go walk around the town, see some of these historic buildings, and we saw what they looked like back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Let's go see what they look like now, and along the way, I want to show you some of my favorite places to get food and go shopping here. So as I walk down, you see these old brick paths that go into some concrete, that go into some rock. You can see there's a real eclectic kind of footpaths in here, because as each generation's come through, they've kind of changed things up a bit. But you can look down the street and see there are shops and shops and shops out in the distance. Why Not Toys? And it's a toy store that's been here for as long as I've lived here, and I absolutely love this place. They always have neat window displays. It's what you would call a classic mom and pop shop, and I'm always up for supporting this place. So if you come to Old Town Spring, please come check out Why Not Toys. So here's a quick pan through the inside of Why Not Toys, and you'll see they have all kinds of things from educational to room designs to a lot of stuffed animals, and they have things for kids of all ages, including big kids like me. So I love this store. I want to give them a quick plug while I'm here. Why Not Toys in Old Town Spring. So from Why Not Toys, I'm actually heading more towards the east, actually towards the railroad tracks. So I mentioned that this town is really set up as a railroad town. So as we get closer to those railroad tracks in that area, away from where the museum was off to the west, we're going to see slightly older buildings, and we're going to see some more of those historic buildings we saw in the photos at the museum. So what you'll hear is there's a lot going on here, including places for teachers to come check things out and get some ideas. We've got jewelry places, and one of our favorite stops, of course, is Emmy's Sweet Shop, where you can get a whole bunch of different types of drinks and all kinds of old school candy. And this has been one of my and my daughter's favorite stores to come into for years. We come here and grab candy all the time and soda. So I want to make sure again that I plug these folks while I'm here. One of my favorite things about Old Town Spring now is all the little quirky shops that are through here. Like you can come up here and pose with the royal family on top of the balcony for this British market that's over here. Or you can check out a caboose and go get some classic Texas cuisine like barbecue, burgers, gator, and get live music at the same time. And because of all the German heritage here, they have a German gift house, but they also have a Dutch gift house. And then we already saw the British store down the way. Across the way, you can see the old schoolhouse and the school bell on top. It's become some kind of, looks like a hangout area or maybe a restaurant that's over there, or they do it as a meeting house, but that used to be the Old Town Spring School. So here's a nice map of Old Town Spring. So we started here at the museum, which you can see is at this V. I worked my way down, went to the toy store over in this area, and then kept working on down until the old schoolhouse here. And now we're going to keep working on down this road until we get all the way down here by the railroad tracks, which is the original Wunji Saloon and building. And we'll take a look at the old railroad house and then work our way back down Main Street here. So this was about the orientation in the area where we saw that old photo in the Spring Museum where it showed the Wunji's building here. If you remember, the train station was back over here. However, the train station is now moved. The other thing we can see here is actually, if we look across the way, this is known as Mallett's Rock Shop. Now, you all know I'm a geologist and I love rocks as well, so this is one of my favorite haunts and hangouts. But what's also important here is this was the old Texas State Bank from the 1920s and the 1930s, and it was a scene of multiple robberies, including a shootout that happened where you can still see the bullet holes within the wall. So let's go take a look at that, as well as they actually have the original bank vault still in here that we can take a look at. This is the side of the Spring State Bank that I mentioned was from the 1920s and 1930s here, and it still has the original brick building here. Of course, it's been painted and refurbished through the years, electricity added to it. But what I want to point out are some of the indents that are actually on the outside of this building, and they say that this one and this one were related to a shootout that took place here in the 1930s. Now, there's a lot of mythos around that shootout. I've heard that it was just some robbers that came and had a shootout with the bank owners here that wouldn't give them the money, and then they ended up with those bullet holes on the outside on the brick here. I heard they were members of the Bonnie and Clyde gang, as well as Bonnie and Clyde themselves. Now, there's no evidence that it was Bonnie and Clyde themselves. However, maybe it was somebody from the Bonnie and Clyde gang that could have come down here. They did have a hideout just north of here in Conroe. And if you all saw my Texas prisons video, there's a link there, as well as I'll put a link up here right now so you can see about the Bonnie and Clyde hideout about 20 minutes, 30 minutes north of this area. However, there's no direct evidence that they ever came down here, but it's part of the mythos of this area that Bonnie and Clyde may have robbed this bank. Let's go inside and take a look at the vault that's in there. It is the original vault. And on my way in, I'll show this bullet hole here again. So in the back of the shop is the 1917 Spring State Bank vault. And it has some memorabilia in here as well, including old Wunji's Brothers Cafe menu. You can see some old money there, and there's a picture of the old Spring Cafe, which is the Wunji's Cafe. Really neat to see this original vault, and you can see the size. Look at the size of those hinges, and if this was the whole thing, this would have been quite thick. Okay, so we saw the vault, but I can't pass up some beautiful rocks. So here's some nice fluorite. You have some other fluorite. You have lots of fluorite here. Some grape agate as well. And check these out. Megalodon teeth. So the business that is now inside of the old State Bank is actually a rock shop, which, talking about perfect for me. Come talk about history and then get to check out some really cool rock samples and fossils. And this place is called Mallett's. So if you want to check it out, I highly suggest you do. You come here and check out all their fantastic rocks and items. And always a big plus to me is wherever anywhere has the Geology of Texas map up, to get my thumb of approval. And what's amazing is they have samples in here that are museum quality. So if you come in here, come take a look at all the samples they have. It's worth coming in to check those out. And find yourself a nice souvenir. All right, from the old State Bank, I'm going to start walking down to the Wunji Saloon, which is one of my favorite places to grab a burger in this area. If anybody's ever looking for some food, you want to come sit down, have, we'll call it an adult beverage, and have a really good burger. This is one of my favorite haunts and hangouts, and it's still here since, as you saw in those pictures, since the early 1900s. This building is still standing and still serving food. And on this building, there's actually a Texas historic marker. And so this was constructed in 1902 by the Wunji family, which we learned about in the museum a little bit, who came here in 1846 from Germany. So they were one of these German families that helped settle this area. And of course, it eventually continued to grow. And it says this is Spring's oldest existing commercial building on its original site. And so they probably say on its original site because if I look across the road where we're going to walk next, that's actually the old train depot where you see where it says Puffabilly's. And that may have actually predated this building, but that building used to sit right here, as we saw in the photos. So this is where that Spring railroad station or train station would have been at. And because I'm here, although there's loud music behind me outside of Wunji's, I want to show the train coming through here. So still an active train line here. So if you come here, you may get lucky and be able to see a train pass through. Walking towards the old train depot, one thing I'll mention is that one of the popular activities in Old Town Spring now is going for ghost tours or ghost walks. And there's a number of companies that do that. I've gone on one, my daughter's actually gone on two at this point, and we've really enjoyed them. You actually learn some really interesting history about the town, as well as, if you're into it, paranormal activity. One of those main places for paranormal activity here is supposed to be the Wunji Brothers Old Saloon and Hotel. If you can imagine a hotel along a railway, all the things that could happen here, from people taking their own lives to murders to fights to various things happening. There's all kinds of stories about this area, as you know, kind of classic old 1800s, early 1900s town. All right, let's go take a look at the old train depot. And from across the street, you can see the old train depot here. Now, it's a restaurant called Puffabilly's, which is actually one of my other favorite places to come eat at here. And that's because they have amazing chicken tenders of all things. And I love their mashed potatoes and actually love their green beans. So this is a local staple here for folks who come and visit. You can actually go eat inside the old railroad depot. And if you remember from the pictures, you can remember where there was this little rounded bay window on the edge of the train depot, which you can still see here, although it's been a bit modernized so people can come here and eat. And again, it's a really fun place to come hang out and have some food, and I really enjoy eating here. And besides coming here to eat, you can also come here for live music. They used to do old Western melodramas as well, and I'm not sure if they're still doing those. But Thursday nights, open mics, if you're in the Houston area, it's a lot of fun to come here and listen to different individuals play, including possibly even myself. If I break out my banjo again, I have had the opportunity to play on the stage here a few times and really, really enjoyed it. Something about walking around these old towns and seeing how they preserved historic buildings like the old train depot here and some of these old strip houses through this area where some of the railroad workers would have lived or merchants would have lived is just fascinating to me. And walking down these old cobblestone streets and thinking about all the individuals that came before myself and the history and the stories is so much fun. As I start working my way back towards the museum and where I parked, I want to plug one other place here that I like to go shop at, and I know the individuals that own this place, and that's Thad's. And Thad's is probably my favorite place to come for unique gifts that's not a rock store in all of the greater Houston area. So Thad's is a novelty store. They always go all out for theming, like you can see right now. They are all ready for Halloween, and we're at the end part of September at this point. And you can see they're decorating for Halloween. They have a lot of unique gifts, and the owners are absolutely fantastic. So if you do come to Old Town Spring, this is another shop I would highly recommend. So I'm on Main Street now where we were at with the depot, and just walking through you can see again these unique shops. This is a shop full of birdhouses, and there's all kinds of unique birdhouses here. So you're looking for unique gifts. There's a hat shop here which I've gone to multiple times. Really enjoy doing that. There's a place for a dog boutique and gift shop, really cool to check out. Hey, definitely worth coming down to check out these unique gifts and unique places. And they're in these old historic homes, which is so awesome and just creates this amazing feel and ambiance and world that you get immersed in as you come through. And I love that they're old historic houses. Although I wish they had a little information on each of these houses, and maybe I'll post that out there for somebody in the future, maybe from the Historic Society here, the Old Town Spring Historic Society, to put little pamphlets that walk you through what each of the houses' stories are and who lived in them. If they could track that down, I'd be really interested to learn that. And here is one of the old mansions in Old Town Spring. I love the old lions. This seems like something that should be in a movie for either maybe a scary movie or a haunted movie or something else. And it's actually a rock and gem shop. So let's go take a look at some of their rocks. And one of my favorite rooms is the geode room that they have in here. And you can see they have the different types of crystals. So they have kind of amethyst geodes, citrine geodes. You'll see all kinds of crystals. And check this out, a septarian nodule bowl. And these septarian nodules are actually from southern Utah, not far from Zion National Park, but this is a beautiful one that they made into a bowl here that you can use. And look at that fluorite skull. Wow. That's Jim. It's a fluorite skull for $5,200. Wow. And they have a whole bunch of just absolutely beautiful fluorite at this shop. And of course, Bigfoot. And here's a picture of the house in 1895 that we're inside of. So this house has been here for 130 years. Wow. That's really cool. And they're playing the Doors in the background, so they get a thumbs up from me. So we've come full circle now. So started here at the museum, worked our way down the road, all the way down to the railroad tracks, worked our way up, all the way down Main Street back to where we're at today. So with that being said, I think this is a good place to go ahead and stop and say thank you all for joining me today. I really enjoyed taking to Old Town Spring, one of my favorite places to come to. I come here at least once a month, walk around, do some shopping, eating, sometimes even more than once a month. If you all enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next adventure.